people try to put limitations on me, and skating and surfing are those sports that are like hard or dangerous or take a lot of time and have often been said you can't do it. And I like proving people wrong. And I think that's kind of what's got me into it, and is saying, you know what, I don't agree with what people say I can and can't do. I listen to a creator who says what I can and can't do.
Hi everyone, I'm talking this morning with James Chappo Chapman, and it's a real blessing for me to be able to be doing this interview. I've heard James speak a couple of times in different contexts, and his story is super inspiring. And James, that's an incredible gift that you have to be able to engage an audience and inspire them.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I feel so blessed. It's so good. Hey, I'm so stoked to have that gift and be blessed to share my story. And it's something I've definitely dreamed of, but not something you ever like think will become a reality.
I was stoked also to hear that you're now working for a church and helping out pastoring the youth. And I just think, how brilliant is that?
Yeah, it's so awesome. So I am a youth pastor at the Granary Church in Newcastle and have been doing that role for just over 2.5 years now, and absolutely love it.
And you mentioned to me offline that you're going to Africa. What's that about?
I am. So on Saturday, I fly to South Africa with Will Somerville and then another one of my friends, Josh Levy, and we're aiming to go over there and film like a surf documentary series on, it's called More Than a Wave, showing that like as important as surfing is in our life, there's so much more. It's about identity, relationship, who you are, who you were created to be. And yeah, planning on filming this really cool little film over there.
I look forward to seeing the finished result. So thanks for jumping on, and I really appreciate you giving me some time. And this channel is all about making people aware of how people go from maybe not having faith or not having a faith that's really active in their life to having a faith that's very real and important to them, and what that transition looks like. And if people have got a story in there, then we want to hear that. And it's all about how lives are changed by the power of the gospel. Jesus coming from heaven as a man, dying, rising again, and living in us by his spirit. So I just want you to lean into that. Love to hear about the skating and surfing stories too. This is a personal passion of mine, probably a bit more historical than present, but I can live through you. So tell me a little bit about growing up, and was there faith around you at home?
Yeah. No, so growing up, I was born in a non-Christian family. So I was born with a condition called pseudoachondroplasia, which is a rare form of dwarfism that affects roughly 1 in a million people. And growing up, my parents didn't want me to get bullied. So they wanted me to go to a school that went from kindergarten to year 12, so that from going from primary school to high school, there wouldn't be that gap. And they didn't want a chance of like further bullying happening in that gap. So then my parents put me in one of the local Christian schools in Newcastle. And really that was like the most transformational thing that happened in my life and in my story. And they put me in that school because it was cheaper than the local grammar school that went K to 12, but it was also had really good reviews, and it had that full whole of life like learning.
You mentioned it was a rare form, or is a rare form of dwarfism.
Yeah.
What's the categories of dwarfism?
So there are over 500 different types of dwarfism, which is crazy because you don't really think about it. You just think of someone being short-statured and everyone's the same, but there are so many different types. So your main type of dwarfism is called achondroplasia. And achondroplasia is the people that you mainly see on movies, like Peter Dinklage, like those sort of actors. You'll see they'll have a longer forehead, their nose will be pushed in a little bit more up here, and they'll be generally a bit taller than me. They'll be a little bit like longer limbed, as my form of dwarfism is pseudoachondroplasia, so it's like a smaller version. Our face and head structure is the same as an average height person, though like our hands and things are smaller and our limbs are smaller as well. So yeah, it's crazy. There's so many different types, and every different type has all these amazing and intricate parts to it as well. Yeah, my dad is short-statured and my mum is average height. And so for me, it was a 50% chance of being born with dwarfism. But for my dad, both his parents are average height. His brother's 6'5" and his other brother's 2 something. And so for my dad, he was that 1 in a million is the chances of my form of
Mm.
dwarfism. So he had that genetic
Mm.
mutation.
So they
Yeah.
put you into this
So
school, and tell me about the intersection of your condition and how that
mhm.
got you thinking about life, or maybe questions of faith, or
Yeah,
what did that
yeah.
lead to?
I think my first kind of like really knowledge of Jesus was obviously in like chapels and things like that. And being in a Christian school, you kind of hear about him from your teachers and stuff. And then when I was in year 3 and 4, this kid moved to our school from Brisbane and we became best mates. And I would stay at his house on a Saturday night, and then on a Sunday we go to church together. And that's just because his family goes to church. And that kind of became like my first idea of what church looks like. And I just went because it was fun. I was like, I was staying over, I was hanging out with him, like I enjoyed it. And then I had a big surgery when I was 9 years old. And that was kind of the first time I realized that I was different from other people. I think before then, I kind of felt normal. My dad was short statured. Um, there was no massive changes in my life compared to another person. I look back and I don't look at life like I was very different.
Okay.
I'm sure I knew at the time that I was, but I can't remember
Yes.
being physically or really different from anyone else. So it was about when I had that surgery, which led to a really long recovery. That was kind of the first, yeah, real
And the
difference that I
surgery was
remember.
designed to improve things?
Yeah, so the surgery was designed to straighten my legs. So a big kind of thing that happens with short stature people is they have bowed legs, which means that it goes in at the ankles and knees, but will go out around the calves, or even will go out at the knees and in at the hips. So the goal of the surgery was to straighten my legs as I grew. Um, Sadly, it didn't work super well. It was only supposed to be a 2 week recovery. Ended up being close to 6 months, having to kind of relearn how to walk and move and lose heaps of body weight again. I put on over 15 kilos in
Mm.
that time because I was completely bedridden. And then, yeah, I just remember coming out of that just being like, every day that I can move or walk or do exercise is such a blessing.
Prior to the surgery, were you experiencing any kind of pain?
I think my whole life I have experienced pain and still do, but it's not like debilitating at all, and it's not like I've never lived without it. The surgery was like for longevity, but that was definitely like the worst pain I've been in, and just yeah, rattled me at the time.
Mm.
Finishing the surgery, I didn't know Jesus. I went to church every now and then with a friend, and I heard about him at school, but I wouldn't say I was like a Christian or anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah,
So how did that happen?
yeah.
How
Oh,
did it happen
when
that
I
you came to know
yeah,
Jesus?
yeah. How did it happen that I came to know Jesus? It was then again when the power of an
Yep.
invitation. I think that is like honestly, if you look at my whole
Mhm.
journey, it's like people inviting me to church on a Sunday, people inviting me to school or inviting me into their friendship group. The power of the invitation is so important, and I really love Alpha as well because that's what they do is they invite people into the space. And I think I got invited along to this youth group one night, and I loved it. I was like, this is epic. I met the youth pastor was like pushing me around on like one of those wheelie chair things, office chairs, and we're doing like races around the room. There was like praise and worship and message, and I was like, this is sick. Like, I'll be back next week. And I went because it was fun, and I went back and I had fun, and I felt so loved, and the community got around me, and I was like, this is amazing. After a few months of going, I think I probably had this moment where I was like, oh wow, maybe there's a bit more to coming to youth than just having fun. And I started to listen more in the talks and build that kind of connection. And then I would say in year 7, we were at a youth camp. And it was the first time I really like said yes to Jesus in my heart. And I think that was like the kind of day that like radically changed the trajectory of my
Mm.
life. And that camp was amazing for me. I just got filled with the Spirit and was yeah feeling so alive for
Mm.
Jesus. And I think that was the day that radically transformed my life.
Mhm. Was there a point where you were crying out to God, "Why am I like this?" Or were you able to accept who
Yeah,
you were all your
yeah.
life?
No, I think there's been like ups and downs, and I think there always will be. But I remember when I was about 15 years old, I was really struggling with who I was, my identity. I think that's something that happens for a lot of kids at 15 or 16. So I'm not alone
It's
in that.
true.
But for me, it was asking those why questions of why am I different? Why am I short? Why can't I be tall? Why do I have to live in pain? Why can't I be normal? Like, why do I have to struggle? Why can I not play sport or be in any of the teams?
Mhm.
Or like, why do I have to be different? I remember like crying out like night after night, just in tears and just being like, God, if you're good, if you're real, then why'd you do this to me? If you actually love me, then why would you make me different? Like you made a mistake. It's like the Bible says you don't make mistakes, but I feel like you've made a mistake. So what are you doing? And I remember just being so stuck and just so wrestling with that. And then it was after about 3 months of wrestling with that I was asking these questions like, God, can't you just wake me up tomorrow and I'll be 6 foot. Imagine if I was 6 foot tall and I went into school and there was a miracle. I would be able to proclaim your name. I'd be able to give you glory. God, you would it'd be a miracle. I've seen you do miracles in the Bible. Why aren't you doing it in me now? Let me show the world that you still do miracles. Let me show my school. Let me show my community, my family that you're working, that you do miracles. And God was like, no. And I was like, why? Why are you not doing this? Why are you not making me tall? And then he said this thing. He said, you'll have a greater impact being short statured than you ever could being average height. I was like, you're tripping, God. You're telling me that I'm going to have a greater impact staying short statured than I would if I went to school tomorrow at 6 foot tall and everyone saw a visible change in my life. And God's like, yeah. And that just rattled me. I was like, I couldn't believe it. It was like an actual calmness and peace with that. It was like I have a plan. I do not fear. And I think that realization, that understanding became the most transformative understanding of my life, realizing that, hey, you know what? I wasn't made to fit in, but I was made to stand out. That God had a plan for me from the beginning, that he knew me when I was in my mother's womb, like Psalm 139, that whole chapter is just absolutely like they're God's words over my life right there. And I was kind of like, all right, well, God, if this is your word and if your word is true, and I believe it is, then your plan must be greater. I have to trust your plan. And that has been the best decision I've ever made, is actually trusting God when we don't know why, when we don't understand.
How old are you when all this was going on?
I was like 15, like year 10,
Yeah.
year 9,
Massive.
year 10, yeah.
And
Yeah.
God spoke to you. How was that? Was it thoughts in your head? Was it like a knowing in your
Yeah, I
heart?
think it was kind of like thoughts and knowing. It's like and it wasn't like an audible. I think I've heard the audible voice of God like maybe once in my life, like a very audible, like this is it. But that was more of like a change of heart and a change of direction of life.
I was struck by
Um,
what you said about God hasn't made you to fit in, he's made you to stand out.
mm,
And I think I know from my teenage years, and to be honest, a number of my adult years, where
yeah,
fitting in, there's kind of pressure to fit in and to
yeah,
not rock the boat, just go along with the flow.
yeah,
We're all struggling for acceptance. We don't want to have
yeah,
opinions or do anything that's going to make us look like an idiot. So that's
yeah,
pretty relevant to all of us, but it was
yeah,
personal to you because it was obvious physically.
yeah, yeah. And I think because it was so obvious physically, it was actually so important because it made it clear, like with everything else I do as well. It was like, all right, if I'm not made to fit in physically, then why am I made to fit in every other thing? Why do I have to follow what everyone's doing just because it's cool, or why do I have to do things that I actually don't want to do just to fit in? And I think it was actually really good for me, because then when I was in those later years of high school, early years, when other things started happening, it was like I don't actually need to do that stuff, because I know that I'm not made to fit in and follow the crowd, but I'm actually made to stand out. And it doesn't mean that I judge people or that I say bad things about the people that do it. It means that I can go there, I can walk beside them, and they can see, hey, you know what, I can actually do this as well.
Yeah. That's a,
And yeah, that was pretty
yeah,
pivotal.
that's a powerful perspective. So God has spoken to you and you've got this awareness
Mm,
that he's going to do a
yeah.
miracle through you as you are that's
Mm,
going to be bigger than being 6 foot
yeah.
tall. Tell us a bit about the
Yeah.
journey from 15 to now that has been proof of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I think, and it hasn't always been easy either since then. I've wrestled with other faith things since then and questioned my beliefs in other ways. But what's been really important in questioning those beliefs is knowing what your foundations are. It's like I've questioned different theologies and thoughts and ideas, but I've known that my foundation is in the God who created me, in Jesus who rose and again after he died. And, like they're my foundation. So I can question all the other stuff in my life because I already know who I am. I know who I've been created to be. And I know that Jesus died for me. So it gives me like the kind of freedom to go and ask questions, but to not hold on to those questions too tightly. And growing up after that, it was cool to see. I then went and did a Cert 3 in ministry and theology in year 11. And I did a year studying at our church, doing an internship, learning about what it looks like to be in ministry and different theological thoughts. And that was kind of like the most transformational course I ever did in my life. And it was at the end of that course that me and one of the other girls that were doing it, we were sitting at our youth camp that year, and we just felt God say that in 3 years you'll be running a youth ministry. And we're kind of both like, what do you mean? Like, I think I was probably like 16 or 17 at the time. It's like, in 3 years I'll be running youth ministry. This was in 2021. And we kind of, it's the only time I've ever heard the audible voice of God, just like so clearly. We both heard it. We were both sitting there and just like, whoa. And then it was crazy to see how 2.5 years later, I was over in Europe playing soccer, and we'll get to that in a bit. But after that soccer game, I went to London, and the same girl, she was over in London as well. And we were meeting at our old youth pastors. He was now the worship pastor of this church, and there was a few of us over there, big crew. And that week, the youth pastor at that church had quit, and we were like, is this us? Is it God? Did you bring us here to go and apply for this job? So we may as well, we'll apply, because
Right.
it's coming up to the time. So we applied for the job. We got through the first round. I was back in Australia. She was still overseas, and we went for a second interview, got through, a third interview, got through. And this was now December of 2023. And God had told us that we'd be leading a team, leading a youth ministry in 2024. And we're kind of like, whoa, like, God, is this happening? And the church said to us that they'd let us know that they loved us, and they'll tell us between Christmas and New Year. And we kind of were waiting and getting ready, and then New Year came around, and they still didn't tell us. And we're kind of like, it was kind of a busy time. Why would they tell us that anyway? Got to the middle of the month, and they still hadn't told us. Got to the end of January, and they still hadn't told us. And we're kind of like defeated, like, God, you said we'd be running a youth ministry. Like, you had a plan. We were praying and getting ready and preparing. Like, what do you want? And then it was like the 18th of Feb or something like that, 2024. And we got this email from this church being like, hey, we loved you guys, but it's just not right. We're really sorry. And we're thankful in one space that they finally emailed us and finally told us we didn't get it. We were a bit annoyed that it was so late. But it was really cool to see how only 3 hours after that, our senior pastor called us up and said, hey, the youth pastor's sick. We want you guys to come in
Oh, wow.
and start running the youth. And our senior pastor had no idea that we had applied for a job, no idea that we were planning on becoming youth pastors or planning on going into ministry. And it was the same day that one door closed, another opened. And that was an amazing way to link back all the way to see how God is now using my dwarfism and my ideas of identity to speak into our young people. And that's how I'm now the youth pastor at our church and running that, and been doing that for 2.5 years, along with Shelby, who is our other youth pastor. And also since then, I've had the opportunity to play soccer for Australia in the World Dwarf Games, which is the reason I was overseas in the first place. So I wouldn't have even been over in England in the first place if it wasn't for my condition, and wasn't for my dwarfism, and had the opportunity to go play soccer, to go and compete with my country on the world stage. And we made it to the quarterfinals, and we lost to France in the penalty shootouts. And then since then, I started doing social media, and then I got nominated for a TikTok for Good award, which is saying that I was one of 5 people in all of Australia sharing good news on the app TikTok and having a positive influence, which is like the highest award you can get in TikTok. And then now I have got over 400,000 followers and like 500 million views over the past couple of years. And it's cool to be able to share about my dwarfism, my journey, my story, and have all these different worlds that are colliding, where I get to have influence on social media. I get to have influence in church and youth, and get to speak at all these schools and conferences and podcasts. And it's like, none of this would have been possible if 15-year-old me became 6 foot tall. It's just so evidence that God's plan is better than our own. And we only see like a piece of the puzzle. He sees the whole picture. And I think that's like the thing I'm slowly understanding and still struggling with, because I'm like, now I'm like, I want to do this. I want to do this plan. But God's, no, my plan is greater. But I trusted you before.
Yes.
I got to do it again.
What kind of feedback are you getting? I mean, with that audience, that significant influence, what's the reaction you're getting that confirms to you that this is God?
It's amazing. When we started our youth ministry, we had 17 kids that came the first night. At our youth camp last year, we had over 160 people. We're planning for our youth camp this year. right now. We're planning on getting like 150 to 200 kids, and I think that's just a testament of like, if you do something prayerfully, if you do something that God is leading, then it's going to grow. And I think that's just the element everywhere is like, keep praying into it, keep believing. And if God is like, stop, then you stop. You don't do it out of your own strength. Like, everything needs to be in God's strength.
What messages that you're giving are really landing?
The best thing that lands for a young person, and I think for anyone, is vulnerability. And I think you look through the Bible and you see when we listen to those vulnerable stories, we read those vulnerable stories about people who didn't always get it right, but came back to God. And I think that's what our kids need to hear. He's like, you know what? You're going to stuff up. You already have stuffed up. But who do you run to when you fail? And I think that's what I see land is like David. He's not a man that I look up to in moral standard or anything, but a man that always came back. But I've just got to move out into the other room.
Bit of movement in the house.
Bit of movement, yeah. Sorry, God.
You mentioned identity, and that's been a big one for you. Is that something that you share with others?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I think that's something that the youth always like listening to and I think really relate with. Because at 15, you have no idea who your identity is in or what it's in. And that's the case for 90% of young people. So it's just showing them that, you know what, they've been created by God, who's called them by name, who has a plan, who knows the amount of hairs on their head, who knows the purpose for their life. Those are kind of the messages that sink in. And I think the most important thing in that as well is just like showing them that every day, showing that they're loved and important, showing up for them when they need it and being there for a chat or just rocking up every week, doing the consistency, even when you don't want to be there, when there's a million other places you could be. It's like you rock up for them. I think that's what I've learned in my little time in ministry.
There's a number of people online that have these inspirational kind of stories. You can do anything. It's hard to gauge what's actually going on for them in their world, like personally, and whether that's a real thing. And then I think, can you really do anything? Is that the message here?
Well, I don't think we can do anything, but I think Christ can do anything. Like Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And it doesn't mean that I can go jump off a roof and have wings and I'll fly. But it means that with prayer and persistence and God willing, then there is so much more we're capable of than we believe. And I believe that we set boundaries on our life that are greater than we need. Like the only limitations you have are the ones you give yourself is like a word that we're kind of using for this film that we're making later this year. And it's like, there's no way I'd be able to go and travel Africa by myself. But being with a friend who can help and another friend, it's like, then suddenly more things become possible. And it's like surrounding yourself with people that know Christ, that are going to build you up. I think that's when things really can happen. I think in my world and in my life, people have tried to put limitations on what I can and can't do. And what I do love about the world of like encouraging, saying you can do anything is not necessarily saying that you can go out and be the number one batsman for the Australian cricket team. But it means that whatever you thought was the max you could do, maybe that will encourage you to push 1% more. And I think that we could all do 1%, 1% more, or try something 1% harder, or go deeper 1% more with God, like just that idea of like never stop learning and never stop like pushing yourself.
I love the fact that when we start following Jesus, the Holy Spirit comes to live within us. We have this capacity and this empowerment to change and be that 1% better each day if we're open to God. It's quite a special thing. You never stop growing. You never stop learning. You never stop changing.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. And I think that's the good thing about a relationship with God is the Bible is like the Google Maps to life.
Yeah.
It's like we get to learn how to have a perfect life and get to learn what it looks like to follow Jesus. And we definitely don't get it right, but we can try again every day. And I think that's the most important.
It's so much more than a belief system. Just your content, you're obviously into skating, surfing, and you do things to a pretty high level. You're going to meet some big waves in South Africa, probably.
Yeah, that's the plan. I think it was another one of those things of like people tried to put limitations on me, and skating and surfing are those sports that are like hard or dangerous or take a lot of time and have often been said you can't do it. And I like proving people wrong. And I think that's kind of what's got me into it and is saying, you know what, I don't agree with what people say I can and can't do. I listen to a creator who says what I can and can't do. I'll show you that. And I think they're not only just areas that I can prove people wrong, but areas that I really enjoy. Areas that sometimes being short-statured can really help in lower center of gravity, great balance, like things like that are really helpful. Obviously, it's a lot harder in other ways as well, like paddling and movement and getting out the back can be really challenging. But I just love them. A lot of my friends do it. So it's just another way that I can be with mates, and it's also a way that I can connect with God through nature and things as well.
Have you got anything in your heart for the next 5-10 years that you think God might open up?
I think my kind of goal in life is to be a positive influence and lead people closer to God. And whether that's through talking about him and sharing his word, or whether that's through encouraging someone, I just pray that doors open up in that space.
Mate, let me pray for you. Then thank you once again for the time. Heavenly Father, I thank you for James. I thank you for your hand on his life. I thank you that before he was born in the womb, you knew him and you knew the destiny and the plan, and that you've created him in Christ Jesus to do good works. And I thank you for the good works that are ahead of him. I thank you for the confirmation and the validation that you have given him from your Father heart concerning his identity, concerning his mission in the world, and the great love, Lord, that you have for him. I thank you that he is taking those messages and he is spreading your love and your word. And of course, there will be challenges going forward, but I thank you, as he said, for the foundation that you've given him, and that's rock solid. And I pray, Lord, that he'd always return to that. Lord, as he goes to Africa for this film production, that you would go ahead of them, Lord, that you'd bless them, keep them safe, give them great waves. And I thank you for the glory that you will bring to yourself through these ventures, Lord. I thank you for this youth group that he's pastoring, for the growth that he's seeing there, for the lives that he's seeing changed. Lord, for the influence that he's having through the power of your Spirit resting upon him, through the good news that you've given him to share. I pray that you would continue to extend that, and that in all things, Lord, he would keep looking to you. Bless him today and all those around him, his family, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you so much.
Have an awesome day, and look forward to hearing
you too
how Africa goes.
I'm sure I'll see you again.